If you find yourself stuck, unable to take action, or retreating into avoidance, you might be in a freeze state. And this survival response could be quietly holding you back from creating the reality that you want. Today, we'll explore it in depth. Hello, my loves. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Lorena. I'm a somatic self-concept and identity coach, and I support you in bridging the gap between who you currently are or see yourself as and who you desire to be or become. This video is part 3 of our series around manifestation and the nervous system. In this series, we go through all the nervous system states and how they impact your manifestation, and also how that state in itself impacts your motivation to manifest in the first place. In part 1, you received an overview, very essential to watch, and in part 2, we dove into the fight response. And today we're covering the freeze response. If you missed the previous videos, I have linked the playlist below so you can catch up, but let's dive in. So as opposed to the fight response, the freeze response manifests in a completely different way. I always think it's funny when people online share methods around manifestation or changing your self-concept or even regulating your nervous system that doesn't take into account where you're coming from, as if it's a one-size-fits-all. Based on your own nervous system, your emotional landscape, and your subconscious programming, you will need to approach this completely differently. The freeze response, for example, that's all about shutting down. It's a survival mechanism that, when it kicks in, immobilizes you. It leaves you in inaction, avoidance, and also emotional numbness. It's a protective state, but it can really sabotage your manifestation process. So before we dive into how this response impacts your manifestation and why you may even feel called to manifestation when you're in a freeze state and what you can do about it, I want to give an overview to you of what the freeze state is in detail so that you can see, is this me? So that you can see if you're recognizing yourself in this. So just like all the other survival states, the freeze response is a really clever way for your body to protect you from external threats. Sometimes that's an actual threat, and other times it's what appears to be a threat. Last week, we used the example of being attacked by a tiger, so we're going to continue with this. If you were attacked by a tiger and your body would put you into a freeze state, you would basically play dead. Going into a survival state when you're under threat of losing your life is really, really important. You don't want to have a calm, regulated nervous system in that moment, because that would mean you wouldn't survive. So how does the freeze state protect you? Well, it bypasses the instinct to either fight or flee. The flight response we're going to cover next week, by the way. So instead of doing that, you freeze. And in some scenarios, that's actually really useful because there's a lot of predators in nature who aren't stimulated if their prey isn't in motion. If you're attacked by a grizzly bear, you're supposed to play dead because you have a higher chance of survival then than if you were to run away, for example. Now, the problem is that your nervous system is also primed to register things as a threat that aren't necessarily a threat. And especially if you have a lot of trauma. I encounter the freeze response in my clients very often when they have very intense trauma in their past. It can become very chronic. They're almost never out of it. It's their default state because it kept them safe for so long. So I invite you to ask yourself, how are you responding when you're under stress, when you feel overwhelmed? Do you feel incapable of doing anything? Then you might be going into a freeze state. If you're disassociating or zoning out, you might be in a freeze state. So what are some other ways the freeze response can manifest? We already covered feeling unable to act. Now you can even feel unable to move. You can feel outright paralyzed, and you can feel numb. You can have difficulty connecting to your emotions or even being present in your body, being present in the now. It's very common to feel disoriented, to feel like your mind is unclear and foggy. You might be confused. You're not able to think clearly because you're not centered and neutral. not only are you zoned out very often, disassociated, you're not in the present moment and you're not in your body, you're also often unable to get back to it. It's much safer for you, or it feels safer for you, to escape into your head. That happens because being present with the emotions that are actually there is too much for you to handle. Let me know in the comments if you've ever noticed yourself doing any of this, and if so, in what situations. But it's very nuanced and it's not going to feel the exact same for everybody. It's person dependent, it's situation dependent. I teach a lot more about this, and more importantly, I teach you how to rewire your nervous system and change your habitual state of being, the state you return to the most, in my coaching program, Recreate Yourself. That's where we resolve the trauma in your nervous system as well. And we go really deep to change your subconscious beliefs and completely repattern the relationship that you have with yourself, with your body, with your past, with your trauma, with your future, so that we really transform your self-concept from the ground up. And doing that will lead you to being able to actually create the reality that you want, so that you don't have to follow manifestation techniques and feel like you're going in circles, because that can often happen. Now, let's talk about why someone in a freeze response might even seek out manifestation. Now, you already saw that going into a freeze response means you have a tendency to disassociate when things get overwhelming, when things get too much, when it's too much to feel whatever's present. That's your safety mechanism. And so you go somewhere out here, or you escape into your head, you're not present in the now. Now, a lot of popular manifestation techniques speak to this. Popular techniques work with things like visualization or affirmations, meditation. None of these tools are necessarily bad, but they are very mind-focused. And because of that, they can be a fantastic tool to not have to feel, seemingly. So unconsciously, someone in a freeze state, or with a tendency to go into a freeze state, might seek out manifestation because it allows them to not have to feel, not have to face reality. Especially if you think consciously or unconsciously that getting whatever you desire will mean that you don't have to feel the discomfort that you might be feeling right now, or you don't have to face any trauma from your past, or you don't have to feel any emotions that are present, then you could, again unconsciously, use the drive towards an external result to bypass as an escape to suppress what you're truly feeling and believing. The overwhelm that triggers a freeze response can also lead you to just seek an external solution because it's just too much to go within. And nice sounding manifestation teachings can seemingly provide that. Let me know if any of this resonates. If you're really honest with yourself, have you ever felt like, if I get what I want, then I won't have to feel what I currently feel? Have you ever felt like doing affirmations all day, or sitting in meditation, or visualizing, escaping into your imagination is the easy way out? If you're really honest with yourself. Now, why is this problematic though? Because it is problematic. I mean, you can already tell that the freeze state is not a comfortable state to be in, even though it's a survival mechanism and in some cases useful. You don't want to be in this chronically. It really keeps you from experiencing life. And so following manifestation practices can actually amplify your freeze response when it comes from that state originally, because you're encouraged to disassociate even more from reality when that is already your go-to state. Why is this a problem? It can make you more traumatized, because what you actually need is the opposite. You actually need to go within. Now, caveat here, if you're in a chronic freeze state, or you have a lot of trauma to resolve, or deep trauma to resolve, you don't just want to go within and confront yourself with that. That's re-traumatizing too. Some things that I very often hear from clients that have worked with other coaches or done other programs in the past is that they were either told to completely bypass their trauma, which I hope we're getting to a world finally where that isn't taught anymore, or they are confronted with it far too quickly when they're not ready for it. Resolving your trauma needs to really be done in a safe container with a skilled practitioner who can hold a safe space for you. And it shouldn't be done alone, because that can make it even worse. But a lot of manifestation teachings, whether intentionally or not, can make you more disconnected from yourself. And that can play into your trauma and into your triggers and keep you in a survival state. It's possible that when you're coming from a freeze state into the manifestation world, this whole messaging of living in your imagination could mean that you actually live in your imagination instead of living your life. You're not present with life, right? Now, the problem with that is that there will always be a part of you that realizes that it's not real if you're not confronting what is actually happening and what you're actually feeling. And also, if you're in inaction, which you tend to be when you're in a freeze response, it's very difficult to move, right? That's the purpose of the survival state. When you live in your imagination, you don't experience a tangible result, which is ultimately what you wanted. So it can really keep you living in fantasy land without ever experiencing the reality you want in the first place. There is also something here about the dangers of surrendering. Now, surrendering is super important. You don't want to constantly push, right? That's what we covered last week in the fight response, when you're doing, and go to an extreme here. But what happens when you're coming from a freeze response, especially when it's chronic, is that surrendering becomes an excuse for not taking action. I do have a free masterclass series. It's a 2-day masterclass series called Equilibrium, which goes into creating the balance between persistence and action and surrender. So if you are like, well, how do I create the balance? Then that will be the first step for you to uncover that. The link for that is below. But the fact of the matter is, if you're just waiting and hoping for things to change, they likely won't. And the freeze response is notorious for staying in inaction. Do you think you're using surrender as an excuse not to take action? Listen, I know so many people who do this. The amount of people who message me and say, I trust the process, but then a year later they are still in the freaking same place because they haven't done anything about it. It's astonishing. Or are you one of those people who pushes too hard and forces too hard and then nothing moves either? Now, we already uncovered some things, some reasons why this is bad, but let's continue. When you're not experiencing life because you're so paralyzed, you're also not feeling, right? When you're in a freeze state and the manifestation process amplifies that, you're disconnected from yourself, so you're not feeling. Now, not feeling is not a good thing. Most likely, you're actually seeking a feeling when you're wanting to manifest something. So let's say you seek joy and love. Well, if you're disconnected from yourself, if you're in a freeze response, you can't feel that, at least not fully, because you're numb. You can't do that when you escape into your head or disconnect from reality. When I think about the clients that I've worked with that have been in a freeze state when they came to work with me, seeing them wake up from that and becoming able to take charge of their life and experience real, tangible changes, not just in their external reality, but more so in the way that they feel, it's honestly magical. It's worth working on this. It's worth investing in this, truly. Now, all these toxic manifestation practices, right, and going too far into the head, being in this vicious cycle of being in a freeze and then following these heady techniques or not doing anything at all, and then it repeats over and over again because it reaffirms the state you're already in, that leads to emotional suppression. These emotions don't go anywhere. In fact, when you're in a freeze response, you're already living with suppressed emotions. You might not feel them because you're numbed out, but they are there. And when there are emotions in your system that are suppressed, that you haven't fully processed, that you haven't resolved, they will manifest somehow, either through stress in your body, sometimes even disease, or through external manifestations. Suppressed emotions fester in your subconscious. And all of this can lead to a true feeling of powerlessness. This is also something I often hear from clients. I feel defeated. I feel powerless. And I do see it as my job through moving them through this process to really empower them so that they have agency over their life, their reality, their state of being. Because when you're in a freeze response and you're in this feeling of powerlessness, you feel unable to do anything because when you try, it overwhelms you. So you may easily give up or just go in cycles. And you're not actively manifesting anything this way anyway. Because you're not truly able to feel it when you're disconnected from your body, when you're disassociated from reality. Only thinking doesn't lead you there. You need to feel it. Let me know in how far you resonate with the freeze response. If you feel like you are in a chronic freeze state or it's your go-to state, just like with all the other states, I work a lot with clients on this in RYS so that they're able to take their power back over their life and their circumstances and their state, so that they're able to embody a confident self-concept and have clarity about the future and make it happen. So you can check out my program below if you're interested. And then next week, we're going to dive into the flight response and how that correlates with manifestation. It's again a more active response, just like the fight response. So very different from freeze again, but it's very interesting in the context of manifestation because it can go into very different directions. Again, not a one size fits all. Leave a comment on this video, let me know what resonated with you, and then I'll see you next week.